This is episode 78 of Our Modern Heritage, the Home and Family Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jody Tathy. I'm excited to share this episode with you. Greg Denning was one of the very first guests that I had on my podcast almost 3 years ago, and he was gracious enough to return and share more of his amazing talent and knowledge with us. Greg specializes in basically what he calls helping youth to learn how to launch into adulthood, because he's noticed a trend that these youth, even youth from good families with good parents, good youth who aren't giving into bad habits or anything like that. They're just not getting the right kinds of experiences or the right mentors to prepare them for adulthood. So that's what Greg and I go into in this episode. And so I'm excited to share with you because he's talking about families just like yours and mine and ways that we can prepare our young adults to grow up and be confident and resilient. You can check out more about this in my show notes at homeandfamilyculture.com/Greg Denning. I know you're going to enjoy this episode, you guys. I want to welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, my friend Greg Denning. I'm super excited to have him on the show. He is a total transformation mentor and coach, and the creator of the School of Awesome Sauce coaching program. He has been inspiring and training families for the last 21 years on 5 different continents. He grew up in a broken home and ended up out on his own at 16. He studied voraciously to learn the principles and practices of those who live purposeful, meaningful, happy lives. Greg was determined to find the keys to success, build an epic life, and then help others to do the same. He and his wife, Rachel, now have 7 children and have been world schooling around the globe with their family for the last 12 years. They are passionate about family, education, and adventure. They inspire and train ordinary families to live extraordinary lives. Welcome, Greg. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thanks, Jody, so much. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a blast.
I love this bio. You know, your whole your energy around just living an extraordinary life and the inspiration that you just imbue in everything that you do. I'm so grateful that you're creating so much of this out there and that your focus is on helping youth and teens to establish these types of habits and mindsets and things like that. So thank you for your work.
I love it. Just even listening to you read the bio, I was like, oh man, like all these memories and all these experiences. It was just so fun. And we're very passionate and driven about this because we want to make a difference. There's so many opportunities and so much need. Like for my part, I feel like I have this moral obligation to make a difference. And because of my own experiences and what I've learned, I'm like, I can do this. I can help people. And we've been able to literally transform lives. And at the end of the day, for me, that's the most fulfilling thing there is, you know?
Yeah.
Help families. And so we love it. This is what we go after.
So why has your focus been on youth and teens? Why are you so passionate about that?
Well, you mentioned in my bio there, my parents got a divorce when I was real young, and then, some stepdads came and went. And so, I love my parents, and they did their best, and it just situations I ended up on my own at 16, and it was excruciatingly difficult. As you can imagine, just trying to feed yourself and trying to figure out life. And now looking back, oh man, I am so grateful that happened to me. I wouldn't exchange it for anything. But at the moment I was like, this is horrible. I would change it for anything. Right? I would change this for anything. Like, this is so bad. But what it did is it forced me into this position of desperation. I was depressed. I was discouraged. I was hopeless. I was lonely. I was shy. Oh man, I had to find out how to become happy and successful and never, ever, ever let this happen again for my own family. And so that journey, that hunger for knowledge and change led me on this journey that's now been over, 25 years. And I have been reading, I went through this period of like 2 decades where I read at least a book a week. And this wasn't like fluff stuff. Like I'm reading the great stuff. And so I went searching for the best men and women that ever lived and the best ideas. And I found them and then I applied them and I learned and I made mistakes and I applied some more principles and it transformed my own life. Right. And so I got so excited because it was like, you guys, this works. like I learned this and I did it. It changed my life. Like, you got to do this stuff. And so that's where my passion began. I literally started mentoring the youth around me as a youth, and then just never let up. And I just want to help people. And I realized that stage, a beautiful, beautiful stage of teenage years, is like, it's such a formative spot where you can literally like set the direction for a happy, successful life, or let the direction be set for a pretty miserable life.
Right. So you mentioned that you were reading books from, you studied the great men and women in history. And just before I segue into our topic for this episode, I also noticed that one of your courses is about studying great world lit. Yeah. And so why is studying the classics and these great men and women so crucial for our developing teens? We
could do multiple whole podcasts on that question right there. So here's one of the most beautiful things about, now I gotta throw this out there. I was a slow reader. Reading was excruciating for me. It was so hard. In fact, even getting into the university, English and English literature and grammar, that was always my hardest subject. I just struggled so hard with that. And I ended up choosing that as my degree. So I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going. We're done with this. And I chose my hardest subject as my degree subject. And I went after it because what I realized is when you're listening to great books, now we have Audible, or when you're reading great books, you have this opportunity to be mentored by the author. And if you pick great books, you have hours and hours and hours with them, and they're telling you great stories and ideas, and it changes you. And it becomes a part of you. Like, every great book becomes a part of who you are. And it teaches you how to think. Because most of us are like, well, shoot, what should I do? I don't know what to do. What about this situation or that situation? But when you're reading a great book, it's guiding you along and giving you examples from their life, whether it's, true or fictional, even the great fiction books. You're following this character along, and they're faced with some crazy difficulty and challenge. And you're like, what do you do? And then you watch their thought process as they solve their problems. And it literally teaches you how to think and gives you the skill set to make your own life awesome. And so I started reading, younger, and I was like, this is it. One of my all-time favorite books when I was literally living out on my own in this really rough conditions and circumstances. Somehow I ended up with a copy, didn't even have a cover on it. It was just the pages, a copy of The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, and how her family, they were going to protect the Jews no matter what. They were a Christian family. They could have been okay. They could have stayed out of it, but they couldn't. And so they saved hundreds of lives of Jewish people, and they got captured and taken into concentration camps. And everybody in her family ended up dying except Corrie. And she became one of my first solid mentors as I read her story and her faith and her optimism in the worst conditions. And I remember thinking, okay, my life's not that bad. This was bad, but that's bad. It's not that. And if she could be happy and successful and still be caring and loving and serving in that condition, I could do this. And then years later, I got to take my family to her home in the Netherlands, walk up the spiral staircase. Oh, I'm getting emotional here. And to get on my hands and knees with my children and crawl into the hiding place and standing there in that space, return my thanks for the mentoring she did for me as a 16-year-old. That's why we read great books.
Wow. Greg, that's amazing. That's so powerful because, who are the mentors that so many of our youth today look to or don't? I think so many kids are lacking mentors. They're lacking direction. They're lacking any kind of hope. There's so many problems that are stemming from this lack of direction, lack of hope, lack of mentoring, and overconsumption of video gaming and social media, and these things that really only give you a very, very limited and skewed perspective of the world. That imagine how much different the world would be if kids these days read more of these books.
Yes. And that, think about that. Well, and we're going to kind of shift here into the core of the topic about culture, right? But culture is everything. It eats everything else for breakfast. And culture happens whether we know about it or not, and whether we want it to or not. It happens. Culture will always happen. There's no stopping it. And so it can either happen by default, kind of automatically, or it can happen by deliberate action. And so we can operate in default or we can operate deliberately, but either way, it's going to happen. And what you were just describing there is we have these wonderful youth who they don't have the mentor, they don't have the hero, they don't have somebody guiding them along. And so they're floundering, and it's so sad, but that literally becomes their culture. They develop this culture of like, I'm seeking entertainment, and entertainment without instruction. And when that happens, you're setting yourself up for failure, because every one of us is going to have challenges. We're like, it's coming. Life is going to deal that out. That's a common denominator. We're all going to have that. But when that shows up and you don't have the skill set to know what to do.
Well, it shows a lack of, there's no resilience. If you can't have that resilience, then you're stagnant, or you stagger, and you fail. And that's where, the source of seeking out mentors, studying the heroes and classics and stories is such a big deal. And it comes from classics, or it can come from your family history. It can come from your heroes' stories, that they create resilience in our children and ourselves.
Exactly.
So important. So let's segue into this. I mean, we touched on this. It's kind of like what we've been talking about, right? Is this idea of what you describe as failure to launch, that our kids are growing up, but then they stop. So tell us more, like, what does that mean to you? What does it mean? What does this failure to launch mean?
So this is such a fascinating thing, and it's actually a huge epidemic right now. Like it's massive, and there's people, organizations, and people and businesses. People are trying to help with this because it is such a huge epidemic right now. I first came in contact with it years ago when I started meeting. I was traveling around the world with my family. We were working in beautiful organizations and humanitarian efforts and things. And I met some people that were, they actually called them failure to launch programs. And I was like, what is this? And like literally from my own youth, I was working with great youth and even what people term as troubled youth. It's youth who are failing to launch, they're having a hard time. I've even taught classes in juvenile detention, like maximum security juvenile detention centers. Like that's an experience. Ooh. Wow. And so, but I've seen all over the place. And so I met these gentlemen, and they were starting these failure to launch programs. I'm like, tell me about this. And what they do is when a youth gets caught into addiction with drugs or alcohol or pornography or whatever, or they as an adult, they're just not ready for adult life, and they end up kind of crashing and burning, and they're going into these failure to launch programs where parents are paying anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 per month for these programs. And now I have some close friends that run these programs. They run them in the United States. They run them internationally. And we actually this was years ago. We were like partnering because this was my background. We were partnering to do this, build another organization to help these youth because it's such a big problem. And they're popping up everywhere, and they can't handle the load and the influx. And so like it's youth who want to go on a mission, or youth who want to go to college, or youth who want to start a career, or youth who want to start marriage. Mm-hmm. And these are good youth from good families, but they just aren't ready to launch. And so when they go into it and they just kind of fall flat, and it's such a tragedy, and it hurts so bad. It hurts for them, hurts for their families, because that's not what they expected. It's not what anybody expected. But when they're not ready, they don't have the skill set or the mindset, and they're not prepared, they flop. And for the vast majority, like hands down, I think the vast majority of it could have been prevented. But it takes this deliberate effort and intention for years to do it.
So how though? Like what is going on in these kids' lives because I know that this is real. Like I took a lifespan psychology, where they actually had to create a definition beyond adolescence and before adulthood of the lifespan development. I mean, it's like that epidemic that psychology at large has had to define this stage in our development that generally people have been going through. But what is going on? Like, why? I mean, you say these people are from good families, right? So generally you'd think that these parents are, I don't know, teaching them to be adults, but so what's going on? How come they're not?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
This is why it's all around family culture.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge. Like it fits so perfectly here with your message. So, well, and this is what psychologists are saying. They're saying parents are stunting their children emotionally.
Mm.
Whoa, right? And the college campuses, their counseling centers are just overrun. They cannot handle this exodus to the counseling center where they're just pleading for help. How do I handle these social situations? How do I handle the pressure and the stress? How do I handle the emotional situations, the psychological and mental strain? And they're just not prepared. And so they're coming from really good families, really honestly, really good family. And I don't fault the parents. Well, I do fault the parents, but it's not the parents' fault. Like it's on the parents. It's our responsibility and mine too. Okay. It's on me and my kids are facing this too. But I have this responsibility, but most parents haven't been taught that. They haven't been told how to do this. They don't know. They're like, and nobody ever thinks, oh, my kid's going to just fail. Nobody ever thinks it's going to be my kid. They're saying, oh, that won't happen to my kid. Like, that's too bad it's happening elsewhere, but they're not ready. And it takes this like really hyper conscious, deliberate effort of like, we have to fight back. Every morning I have to get up and I have to work with my kid. Here's what happened to me. This was a few years ago. I was out doing something. I was with my 11-year-old son, and at the time, and something popped up. It was a simple life skill that I'm like, everyone needs to know this. I'm like, hey, help me with this. And he looked up at me. He's like, I don't know how to do that. And it was like he just hit me over the head with a club. Like, oh, my own children. Like I just thought they would learn it. Right. I guess so by observing me or something.
Right. So what you're saying is it's not enough just to model these behaviors.
Wait.
You've got to really actually deliberately teach our children these behaviors.
Oh, and not only do we have to do that, like I would say, even the last generation, it would have worked. But in this generation, it won't. Things have shifted enough with technology and devices and societal things and economies. They've shifted enough that like we have to raise our game.
Yeah, kids just aren't paying attention.
No, they're not.
They're just not paying attention.
So distracted. Like they are so unbelievably distracted and drawn into other things that they're not just like modeling and kind of following along, picking things up. Like we have to sit them down. And this is what I do. This is what I do every day with youth and with families. Like we set up these programs and these systems and these classes so deliberately, so intentionally, like, okay, we're working on this. And not only we're going to set you up to survive it, like we're going to set you up to thrive. Like you're going to be leading out.
So this reminds me of the term bulldozer parenting or snowplow parenting. Have you heard of that term before?
Yeah.
Where it's like before it was helicopter parenting, right? Where parents were like following along their kids and solving their problems, right? But now it's bulldozer parenting where they're actually going ahead of their children to prevent them from even encountering the problems.
Oh man, yes.
Yeah, and you brought up in our in your email, you're like you want to talk about this failure to launch, and then you were like, I want to talk about this idea of protection versus exposure.
Yep.
And so, can you go more into that? Like, what are we protecting our kids from, but what should we be exposing our kids from?
Love it. And I gotta say this. I love parents so much. I just love parents, and we have 7 children, and we've been able to kind of help, quote, parent other youth that have come along all over the world. And I am empathetic to the challenge of parenting. It is difficult. And in this generation, it's even more difficult. I mean,
I emphatically agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love parents. Every time I see parents, I'm like, oh, bless you. Give me a hug. Like, oh, right. we got this. We can do this together. We need help.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because I think that when I present this topic, I don't want to be like accusatory to other parents, because we're all doing the best we can with what we know.
Exactly. And we are. And I want to emphasize that, like, these are good parents, and they're good youth too. Like they're good kids. Even kids that are failing a lot, great kids. They really are. Like I know these youths. I mean, they're great grades in academics, and they're super smart, and they're musically talented, or athletically talented. You sit down with them, you're like, this is just a great kid. And so it's not that. But I like literally, I could name for you dozens or perhaps hundreds now of really phenomenal kids that are not ready for life.
So what is it that they're being what are they being protected from? Why aren't they developing emotionally?
Perfect. There's the segue. And so with the absolute best of intentions, we as parents are like, man, I want to give my kid a good life. I want to help prepare the way for them. I want to keep them from all those horrible things that I had to get exposed to. And, myself included, like I went through some terrible stuff. I'm like, I don't want my kid to go through this, but I have to catch myself and say, wait a minute, going through that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And so I'm not going to kick my kid out. Right? Love you, son. See ya. Like we're not going to do that. We have to come up with like a really effective, intentional way to not clear the way for them. So I can't helicopter, and I can't plow the road and like make sure they have this clear path. Like I have to go with them, right? They're not doing this on their own. That's a recipe for disaster as well. To say, okay, son or daughter, like you're going to go have these horrible, rough experiences and exposure, all this stuff on your own. No way, Jose. Like I've got to be, while they're in my home, while they're under my care, while I'm mentoring them, I have to, and Rachel and I do this. We sit down and we go through our mentoring journal. So I have this whole course on how to mentor your youth, right? As a parent. And you sit down through your mentor journal and you're like, what does this child need? Each child needs something different. What does this child need to be exposed to and experience and learn? And we craft that. And Rachel and I, we spend tens of thousands of dollars every year on making sure our children have epic experiences that teach them the lessons they need. And so in our world, what this looks like, and it's not going to be the same for every family, obviously, but in our world, we're going to help them have every kind of exposure they can to real life. And here's a hard question. Okay. This is a hard question. And I'm asking this question to parents, and it's hard. It's a hard one, but we have to ask it, because if we never ask the question, we'll never find the answer. Like, are you 100% crystal clear about the exact things that your young adult will be facing? And then are you implementing consistently those specific things to prepare them with increasing difficulty? Okay, now that's a big, hard question.
Yeah, like how do you define what you want your kids to be exposed to and to learn?
Like, and this is huge because it takes tons of effort and mind work. Like you have to get clear in your mind of what they're going to face. Now, it won't be what you and I faced. It's different. And so it takes some homework. It takes some effort. It takes some research. It takes some real study and learning to get out and say, okay, wow. And I do this all the time. I love this. I'm interviewing everyone I ever talk to. I'm just constantly learning, from really old people to really young people to young adults. In fact, I've just been the last few weeks, every young adult I talk to, like, okay, talk to me. What are you struggling with? What are your youth around you struggling with? What's hard? What are they facing? Like, I feel like I have a pulse on it. I got my finger on the pulse. I know what they're facing. And so I'm really clear on that. And so then now in my mind with my wife and thinking through it and studying it, like they're going to face that. What's the best way to prepare them to face that? So when it rolls up, right? When it kind of comes out of and blindsides them, they're like, oh man, I knew this was coming and I've done some crazy hard things. I'm ready for it. Right. So,
yeah. So I just listened to a talk from General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints of having a game plan. Is that kind of like what you're talking about? So it's like, being able to number one, have a game plan of doing things that cultivate ourselves emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. And then also having a game plan to anticipate the things that we'll encounter, to have a strategy to know how to deal with those things. Is that basically what you're saying?
Exactly. And I love you hit that word. We simply have to be more strategic about it. And so I literally sat down a few years ago and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make, this is my master list. What are the lessons that every youth has to learn before they move out? And I created this master list, and it was well over 100 things. And I'm like, okay, they have to know these things. They have to develop the skill, and skill development takes time. And mindset development takes time. You can't be like, oh man, they're moving out in a couple of weeks here. We better go over some skills. Like, that's not going to cut it. Right? It won't work. And so strategically now I'm looking at my 12-year-old, for example, and like, hey, she's going to face these things. Like, what can I do for her that's going to help her now? Okay. And so, for example, in our family, and I know this isn't possible for every family, but like I have ways to help it be possible. But that's why we do what we call world schooling. Is we're having these massive international expeditions. And so just in a few weeks here, I'm leading a group of families to Mongolia. And we're going out, we're going to stay with the nomadic tribes up on the steppe. We're studying history and culture. We're having these epic, challenging adventures, right? And I'm taking my 12-year-old daughter. She's going to have experiences, and we're going to be reading and mentoring, having discussions and experiences. She's going to have experiences on this trip that will alter the course of her life. And I intentionally formed my trips that way. I took my 14-year-old son up to the base camp of Mount Everest, and he went through some excruciatingly challenging things. And it shaped his life. Now he's more prepared. I took my 16-year-old daughter and my 13-year-old son just recently got back from a World War II expedition. And when I can take my children and we're standing in Auschwitz talking about the atrocities that happened there and how it stemmed from simple prejudice and thinking I'm better than somebody else. And when you stand there and you process that as a family and you stand, when you stand in the women's quarters and you see how these women were treated. And then I asked my group, I'm like, who are the women that you love the most in your life? Picture them here in this space, suffering this insult. Wow. Mm-hmm. How are you going to treat women?
Wow. Yeah. Mind blowing. Oh, yeah.
You just have transformation, and it changes you.
Yeah.
And we've got to do those things, the smaller things on a consistent level that I can do at home, in my home and around my neighborhood, around my community. But then the big things too, that my kids, because I'm so deliberate and intentional about this, my kids are ready. In fact, my 16-year-old daughter is in Guatemala right now on a solo trip. She went down to see some friends. She can handle international borders and customs and airports and language. Her phone died, so she had no way to communicate. She landed on the ground. She's like, I got this. And she just starts walking through town, talking to people. And she just walked right over to where she needed to go on her own in Spanish, because we've been training her for years to do that. And I was totally confident and comfortable. Like, she's got this, because we've been cultivating that strategically. And so when we set up that mentoring process and that journey, we're preparing them to launch successfully instead of fail to launch.
But what are some things that it's like most youth are just going to maybe focus on, going to school or getting a job or getting married? What can we do as parents that maybe just as epic, but more within the scope of our capacity to?
Yes, absolutely. Love it. Great question. Thank you. And not everyone has to do this, although I'm getting to a point now where I'm really emphasizing that everyone should try to make the best effort to do that. And here's why. And I've seen this again and again and again and again. There's some things that can only be learned by personal experience.
Yeah.
And until that happens, the default setting, the automatic for all of us, is to kind of settle into this small mindset, right? We have these parameters because every one of us, we live in our own little, wherever our community is, that's our world. And until we're exposed to things outside of that, that's all we know. And the default for every one of us is to think, well, this is the way life is. And what happens is we slip into, and this is where it gets really dangerous. We slip into these kind of these mindsets that are unintentional. We start thinking certain things about people from other religions or other cultures or other races. Mm-hmm. And if you live in a pretty homogenous area, you find this small little town somewhere and you're like, this is great. This is a great place to raise a family. And I agree. I love that. But what happens is your child grows up not knowing about difference in culture and the different ways of life. And then when they're exposed to it as adults, either on a mission or in college or in work, they don't know how to handle it or process it. They don't have the skill set to do that. And that's where they often fail to launch. And I literally have seen this just in the last few weeks. Even. And so, and you can do this locally too, but you have to be super intentional about it. You can create, you're right. You can create epic experiences right around your area. You can, but it takes tremendous amount of effort and intentionality to do that, where I'm making sure my children are exposed to religions and cultures and different opinions and different lifestyles, both good, bad, and ugly. Mm-hmm. Okay, but they're doing it with you. You don't want your kids getting exposed to drugs and filth and horrible things by their peers. They're telling them it's cool, right? Like, you don't want that. Like, I take my kids and we go out in the world and my kids see the just devastating, horrible effects of choices and decisions. Yeah. And we have lived among almost every religion you can imagine. We went and lived in Morocco, right in the midst of Islam. And it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And we hear these derogatory comments all the time about Muslims. It is impossible for you to convince my kids that Muslims are a certain way because they know for themselves. And they're like, whatever. Mm-hmm. like that kind of reality, like they know. And so we seek out those kind of experiences. So I love academics. I love book learning. Like it's so important, but that can't be the only piece.
Yeah. The definition of academics is not practical, right? Like, it's like academics is just book learning. It's literally just getting the like written form of something and not actually getting that experience.
Exactly. And so the combination of the book learning, because if you don't have the book learning, but you have the experiences, you're missing some wisdom. Mm-hmm. But if you have the, experience without the books is you're lacking wisdom. The books without the experience, you have all the learning in your head, but there's no like relevant application. So it's this beautiful combination of awesome experiences and awesome books that really set us up to succeed. And so that's what each parent has to sit down and do. Like, what great books can we read and what great experiences can we create? And you already mentioned this earlier. I call it my Fantastic Five: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social. Mm-hmm. And we have to do it in each of those areas. Like, so I lead these trips for youth all over the world and wilderness adventures. And so I get to see youth firsthand in tough situations. And it gives me this perspective that very few people ever get of what's working and what's not and where they're falling short. Like, I get to know them intimately close and see them in tough situations. And I always come home from those as like, okay, I know what I'm working on as a parent. Like, whoa, right? Because I get to see it. And so you start creating those like, okay, wait a minute. There's some gaps here socially. Like, can my child have a meaningful conversation with anyone, anywhere, at any time? Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Is awesome, right? That's my definition of social leadership. Okay. Is my child able to handle extreme situations emotionally? Like, I've been in crises. Mm-hmm. Just when you travel as much as we have, you come across things. And I've been in massive emergencies where literally people are dying. Wow. And you watch how people process that emotionally. we've got to build those emotional muscles. I've seen wonderful, solid people collapse completely in some kind of emergency. They're not ready emotionally, mentally, and psychologically. The mental health epidemic right now is just off the charts.
Yeah.
Are they being prepared mentally? Are they exercising those mind muscles? Can they handle challenges and problems and wrap their minds around them? And do they know how to process what's happening here? Right? Spiritually, are they just anchored with deep values and morals and principles? Are they ready? Are they floundering and their moral compass is not functioning and they don't know what's right or wrong? And they're being introduced to all these gray areas and they're like, I don't know. Should I just try it? I don't know. Right. And physically, is their body just in this condition to be able to handle the demands of life? Do they have the energy and stamina to be a parent? Holy guacamole, right? Can you take that and work and everything else, all the other demands? And and I know this sounds overwhelming right now. I just went through this list of overwhelm. And people are like, I can't do it. But there's actually...
It's good to get an overview. Yeah.
Right. And it's just, whoa. But there are tools. And this is what I've been working on for decades. There are tools and resources that just these little tweaks that any one of us can do, and every one of us should be doing. There's these little tools and resources, and this is what I do. Like literally, this is what I do. I help parents implement this stuff. And when I'm doing this to these families, they're just like, "This is amazing! Like it totally transformed our family culture and is shifting everything." And we get outside help and resources to make these little tweaks, and you can see it within days and weeks. You can see the transformation in your family and in your children. And they get this confidence born of competence. Mm-hmm. And now these esteem issues are going away and they're getting this sense of confidence. And now you have a child that's going, I can do this. I can do hard things. Mm-hmm. I got this. And instead of now nagging and dragging and worrying and being so afraid for our children and what might happen, we're like cheering them on, like, oh, you got this. Like, this is amazing. And that's the goal.
Yeah. Well, I think that as a parent, you get so preoccupied with this fear of, them getting hurt or encountering struggles. But everything you're talking about is like, I like that phrase, confidence via competence.
Yep.
That makes so much sense. And all of it really comes back to their capacity to be resilient in each of those areas of their life. But parents get so scared, right? They're just like, no, I need to protect them and shelter them. And what I keep coming back to is like you said in the very beginning, everything that you experienced became part of your story. Yep. That shaped you to be strong and resilient, to have that confidence. And so I think one part of my goal with this platform, what want to accomplish as well is, helping parents to be able to cope themselves with watching their children struggle.
Yes.
And endure these things, knowing that the big picture is they need to figure this out. This is going to help them grow and not constantly rushing in to rescue them.
Yep.
Right. So what is your advice about that? Go ahead.
Well, which is beautiful. You just described that so well, Jody. Thanks for pointing that out. It was beautiful. And the key to that whole situation you just kind of described there with helping our kids get some grit and some resilience and toughness, they have to opt in. If we try to force it on them, they'll dig in their heels and they'll be resilient against you is what they'll be.
Right.
But you want them to opt in. They got to choose. And so there's things we can do really, really easily, in fact, where we set things up where they choose to go, I want to do that. And you say, hey, wait a minute, this is going to be really crazy hard. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to help you, but this is going to be hard. Are you willing to do the hard? And they're like, well, are you going to do it, Dad? And I'm like, well, of course I'm going to do it. I'm going to lead the way in doing hard things. And they're like, okay, I'll come with you. So one easy example is physical things, right? And so right now I'm training for this mountain. We're going to go climb a mountain at the end of this month, and it's going to be excruciating. Like, we are going to be walking.
You're like, yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. Like, it's going to be incredibly difficult. We're taking full packs and we're going to the top of this mountain in full gear. And we start a 2 a.m. approach. And basically you choose suffering, right? And that doesn't sound fun to anyone. But it's the accomplishment. When you get on that peak and you watch the sunrise off, when you've paid a price, we went to Nepal, we climbed up to Kalpatar, which was 18,500 feet above sea level. Wow. And you are just nauseated and freezing and you have vertigo, and you literally watch the sunrise exactly over Everest.
Wow.
And you think, I did this. I paid the price to get here. I can do hard things. And my boys are coming with me on this mountain, and they're training hard. And we say, okay, boys, let's go. And just the other morning, I'm like, let's go, put your gear on, we're going. And we went and we bombed up this mountain because we only had 3 hours. And their legs were burning and they're sweating and their lungs are burning. They're like, we got this, Dad. We got this. We can do this. And I was just like proud parent moment. Like, this is so awesome. They've got some grit here. And what's so beautiful, you're like, okay, so what? You can do physical hard things. No. That's not it. It carries over.
Yeah.
It carries over to social situations where they feel really timid and shy. It carries over to emotional situations when they just want to give up. They want to sit down and cry and give up and throw in the towel. But they're like, no, I can do hard things. And so with them, like literally, I've got my arm around them, like, you can do this, bud. I'm not carrying your pack for you. You got this, man. You got this. And I can't, because I got my own pack on. And in fact, there was one spot where we're like, oh, we just want to sit down and give up. But guess what? We're 2.5 hours from the car. So I said, okay, guys, we can give up, but we're going to be staying the night here, and that'll be even more uncomfortable. And so now it's not me, it's nature. Like it's wilderness saying, well, if you want to get back and have dinner tonight, you better turn on your grit. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when we do those things, we choose those difficult challenges. It literally builds these emotional, mental, spiritual, social muscles in our children.
That's incredible. And when you started talking about that, doing the hard things first, I read the book, The Road Less Traveled. I think that's what it's called. And that's the whole premise. He talks about, if you face the challenges first, then you experience the growth. And because it's the avoidance of the hard things that ultimately it becomes harder in the long run. You got to be able to face that.
Doesn't that seem so ironic, Jody, that our whole society right now is set up to seek comfort and ease? Mm-hmm. Like everything. And you guys, I love all the technology. I love comfortable things. I love all the good stuff we have. But we have to all acknowledge there's a little bit of danger with that. Or actually a lot of bit of danger with that. That if our lives are seeking comfort and ease and nice things without intentionally choosing challenge, then we're setting ourselves up to be able, and our children, we're setting them up to not be able to handle hard things.
Oh, so important.
So like our family statement is DDHT. Dennings do hard things. My kids know that, and it's so ingrained in them, they say it to each other. It doesn't matter what we're doing. DDHT, guys. DDHT, they say it to each other. We do hard things. Let's do this. And so our family culture is built around doing tough things. So my kids are already, they're ready for it. Yeah. And we have to be intentional about that. Oh, this is so good. Isn't this stuff awesome?
Yes. Thank you so much, Greg. I think, oh man, this could go on. And I'm just so grateful that you're out here sharing this message. You're out there supporting teens and parents to overcome these obstacles, being countercultural, and that's really what it takes is to be that way, to look at the culture around us, what's not working, and look for those solutions, exactly. Finding those solutions and just ignoring the voices that are saying, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing? You're forcing your kid to climb a mountain? What? Whatever. Like, ignore that. Like, we have an intention set for our family that we do hard things because that is what's more important than them going out and being protected and sheltered, not being resilient, not learning to have grit, and then flopping.
Yep.
It's having that big picture, right? Like
exactly.
So much, we get so short-sighted thinking I need to protect my kids now, but then in the future they flop.
Yeah, it's always about that end result thinking. What do I want my kids to be like as adults? I'm asking that. I ask myself that all the time. What do I want this young man or this young woman to be like as an adult? Okay, we're doing this thing. Because I would rather be home too. Right? They're like, oh, come on, let's go and watch a movie or something. But I'm like, what's the end result of that? And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. We intentionally choose to just level it up. Now, okay, here's the good news. I got to share this because I know this is going to seem so overwhelming for people. This is literally what I do. This is why I do my mentoring, and I actually have classes that teach youth, and we need the outside help. I hire mentors. I'm a mentor. Professionally, I'm a mentor, and I've been doing it for decades. But I hire outside mentors for my own youth because when a teenager gets that teenage year, they just start resisting their parents just because like they need to. It's not personal. It's biological. I tell them that. Don't take it personal. It's biological. They have to. They need to. They need to start building some interdependence and independence. And so like this is what I do. And there's so many resources out there. So like reach out and get help from outside mentors in these courses and these classes and even these trips. I take youth on trips all the time, like, few big trips a year. I'm taking youth to, U.S. history trips, World War II trips, big adventure trips, just because they have the transformation. Right? I'm doing the heavy lifting. It makes parenting so much easier when you get help. And so there's tons of help and resources to do this. So don't feel like you have to try to do everything on your own because you can't. You can't do it. You need to get outside help.
No, thank you for that. I mean, I've shared in the past I watched this TED Talk that was said that kids who are coping with all of the struggle and the stress and the fear of failure and pressure to perform, things like that, is because they have somewhere, so a vision of the future, somehow that they have a plan on how to get there. Someone, so a non-parental, non-judgmental mentor.
Yes.
And something which is like a source of strength and inspiration. And that was so inspiring to me that if we have just those four things, and those are everything we just talked about, having somewhere is that vision, what are my kids going to be as an adult? Somehow is the plan. Okay, we need to challenge them, do hard things and study the classics. Someone is that mentor, this outside source that you're talking about. And then something.
They've got to get awesome, supportive, positive peer groups. Yep.
And then something is like a higher power or, inspiration that's propelling them forward and more than, that's grit, but it's also a spiritual something that's propelling them forward. And so that's everything we were just talking about. And so I appreciate that this is what your work is, and that this is you're putting this good out into the world and supporting teens and families. Thank you, Greg.
Oh, thank you. No, I love it. This is what I do, and it makes a difference. It works. And honestly, I just feel like I want to give back what I've been given.
Where can we find you to connect with you? There's social media, your website. What's your favorite social media platform?
So I'm really using Instagram right now. We're loving that. So mine is Greg Denning on Instagram, and our family one is World School Family. And so you can connect with us on Instagram or Facebook. We're on there, and then our websites, and literally our websites. We've designed our websites just to be massive platforms of resources for families. There's tons of great stuff in there at every level, from just free trainings to really advanced coaching and training, just at every level. Whoever's ready to level up and make things happen, they can get in there. We have life-changing courses and classes for youth and for parents. And they can get in there and jump in. So I think there's going to be links here in the show notes. Right?
In the show notes, we'll have the links.
All those links, and jump in there, invest in yourself, invest in your child. I love to tell people, here's what just breaks my heart. I really just saddens me so deeply. So many people are hesitant to invest in their children, and especially their youth, until they're troubled teens. And now all of a sudden you're forced to invest sometimes up to $15,000 a month to try to help them recover, when it could have been prevented with a few $100s of investment in education and inspiration and all those things you just mentioned, of getting the mentoring and the peer group and the training and the great books and discussions. So like any investment we make in ourselves and our family and our kids is going to pay off 1,000-fold.
Huge. Yeah.
Worth every
Huge. Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. I'm so happy that you came on the show, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. That's wonderful. I love this stuff. I love your mission and what you're doing. It matters more than we know, because culture is everything.
Wow, what an incredible message. I'm so thankful that Greg was willing to come on my podcast again to share more about these amazing experiences that he's offering to youth and adult and their parents to prepare for launching into adulthood. Greg has created all kinds of courses and resources for parents and youth to learn about these skills, to learn about these opportunities, to have epic experiences that, like he calls them, experiences that challenged our youth to do hard things and grow in resilience around spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and social abilities. And what an amazing idea. It's just this whole concept of having these epic experiences and learning from great heroes of all time is just what a profound idea. And I'm so grateful for Greg and sharing this message. You can check out my show notes about Greg at homeandfamilyculture.com/Greg Denning. Follow me on Instagram at Family Culture Podcast, and remember to like, rate, and share. Mother Teresa once said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family.